Hey everyone, I'm Coach Mike Pieczek and I'm on a mission to help you become your potential. Today I'm welcoming certified professional coactive coach Joe Davis, who specializes in serving women in their 50s and 60s who are approaching what she calls a second spring. And for many women in midlife, this is a time of great renewal and rebirth. And I'm excited for our conversation because we both believe that great coaching starts with a look at our mindset, especially the beliefs that are holding us back. So Joe, thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Meg. Thanks for having me.
I do remember my mother's own second spring. It was a time when my brother and we left the nest. My parents were divorcing, and I wish she had someone like you for support, because I vividly remember that it was a challenging time for her. Can you tell us more about this concept of the second spring?
Sure. So, second spring actually comes from traditional Chinese medicine. And in traditional Chinese medicine, they believe that when a woman's childbearing years are coming to an end, and we are going through menopause, that our energy or our qi actually begins a move upward into our hearts and into our mind. And so we experience this sort of refreshed time of wisdom and energy, and it's actually a second spring for women.
So that's
really actually where it comes from. It's an ancient concept.
Yes, it sounds like that's a time of a lot of enjoyment and excitement. But is this something that women go through as a matter of course, or is it something that needs to be sort of nurtured and helped to come to the surface?
Well, I think everyone comes to it from a different place. I think some people move through it naturally and adapt to new times. I think some people need supports and coaching and other things to, as you mentioned before, it is so much of it is a mindset. Yeah. And I think there's too many cultural influences that tell us women, me in my age, that we are just on the slow slide, right, mm-hmm. of aging and down to old age.
That's the message.
But in fact, this era of 50s and 60s where children are launched, we've had a long career, service to our families, to our community, to our partners, to our careers. And so now it's like, what about me? It's time for me. And so, okay, then what do I want? Yes. And who am I? And so that can also be like really constricting and fearful, but also can be, in a different mindset, very freeing.
Yeah.
And open and energized. So I think it's helping people to make that shift, from one, limiting mindset to a mindset of spaciousness and infinity and possibility.
It's beautiful. I have seen other women in my family, go through this second spring, and it's fun to watch what they get into and what they learn. Just I won't dive into too many details, personal details, but I'm very proud of some of these people who are into things that I never would have imagined that they'd be interested in doing. And it's like it's almost like there's a parallel, it seems, that to when you go off to university as a young adult and the whole world is new again. I kind of like that feeling. And I read a quote the other day that you are most powerfully positioned to serve the person who you once were. So in other words, Michael, I can best help someone who's struggling to build a business or overcome depression or heal from losses. In your case, would it be safe to assume that because you help women with their second spring or in their second springs, that you've gone through your own?
Yeah, I would say I am in it and going through it. I think that it's a work in progress for us all. And I think that second spring can last into your 70s. So I think it's sort of another developmental stage that we move through. And so, yeah, I am totally in it. And I think I've been through some pieces of it. I think for women that have had children, a big piece of it is when they are launched and move out and find partners and start their own adult lives. And so I think as women, and that's the one part that I feel like I've processed to some degree. I have two adult boys, and they've both moved out, and one's still in university, one's moved out west and is pursuing his dreams. Great. And I think that part was hard at the beginning to accept that they just weren't we weren't in the same kind of relationship anymore.
Yeah.
And I think with any transition like that, there's a grieving process, there's a letting go, then there's acceptance, you know, and then realizing that there's a new, like, you know, this was A and now it's B, and now I feel like I've moved through some of it, and they just don't need me the same way they used to. But I mean, I feel like I as a person really, what I want to say, molded myself around their needs, like from the time they were born. And I worked
mothers do.
part-time.
Mothers.
Yeah, I mean, I worked part-time, I stayed at home, I everything I did worked around their schedules. And so my identity, you know, it gets really tied up, as it would with your children and what their needs are. So then when they don't need it anymore, it's like, what? And so part of me feels like, oh my God, like who am I? They don't need me. Like, this is sad. There's the real deep sadness, right?
Well,
And then letting go.
20 years, it's a long time to build an identity based on that of mom or dad or whatever it is.
Yeah, same for dads, for sure.
And I think it happens almost imperceptibly over time. It happens below your conscious awareness. But yeah, you do decide, oh, I am this type of person. Like for me, it's been entrepreneur, it's been world traveler, now it's dad. It's it's happening slowly and subtly, and it really gets in there. And over time, it's like, wow, things are really changing fast. And for me, I'm actually turning 40 in December. And for me, this milestone has been a little bit of a wake up call, you know, as it usually is when you hit a birthday with a 0 at the end.
Yeah.
And it's not just because I have more gray hair every day, but I'm excited. But I'm also struggling to come to terms with just how fast life is moving. And
Yes.
I imagine that aging is a prevalent theme in many of your clients' lives.
Yeah.
You mentioned grieving. I think, you know, for me, it's a grieving process a little bit of I'm not as, you know, my knees hurt a little bit more than they used to, or something like that. What do you tell your clients about aging? And yeah, it's definitely something that I'm interested in. So just hear what you say.
Well, I think I don't necessarily tell them much about aging. I suppose I listen to how they're feeling about aging, and then coach them from where they are. So I think everyone has a very different approach to that, and a different feeling about aging. I think it's important, just you know, what is, and we're aging. Our bodies are aging. Our minds are aging. But our experience is building, and our wisdom is building, and we can still feel. And that's sort of part of the second spring, is in this body of mine, this 57-year-old body recently. I feel fit. Yeah. I feel energized. I'm healthy. I don't feel old.
So happy belated birthday, by the way.
Well, thank you. And also my almost 95-year-old mother says, she talks about the old ladies, right? The old ones in their place where she lives. So she said, I don't feel old.
Consider herself one of those, I assume.
Well, I kind of said, well, Mom, like, you're 94, so, you know, you might be one of them. She said, I don't feel old. I don't feel old up here. I feel 40.
Right. She raises a very interesting perspective there, because there is your biological age, how many years you've actually gone around the sun. And then there's your almost like your psychological, mental, I don't know, what is it? Is it how well you've taken care of yourself, or is it a decision to say constantly live at the age of 29 or 30 or something?
I don't know. That's a really good question. I think it's important. Like, I've noticed it's really important to pay attention to way more important to pay attention to the physical health stuff when you get a bit older, because yeah, you really feel it more. So making sure you're exercising, making sure you're eating healthy, getting enough sleep, like all those things we know. But I think as you age, like, you really notice when you don't do it, when you're sort of not taking care of yourself. But when you're younger, like, you just kind of, whatever, you just.
When you're in your early 20s, it's like you don't have to work for that great chiseled body. But I'm actually someone who works out quite a lot. I love my weightlifting, and it's a bit of my it's a bit of a, a temple for me. You go and you're in a quiet, sacred space and you do your thing, and the whole world goes away. But I would consider myself in quite good health. But recently, I've definitely been getting a lack of sleep from having a 1.5-year-old,
Yeah.
and I'm pushing hard, and maybe not eating the best, and maybe having one or two extra glasses of wine in the evening, and I am feeling that add up. I still don't feel 40. I feel like I'm somewhere in my my mid to early 30s. I think. Yeah, it's just interesting to me that the whole your actual driver's license age doesn't have a lot to do with your mental conception of your age, which I love. So
Yes, I
how do
completely
you
agree
maintain
with you.
that? How do you maintain that youthfulness?
Well, I think you just if you have right now and 40 have the mental view of yourself as a 30-year-old, that kind of mindset just carries on.
Yes.
I feel 57, whatever that means. I feel maybe 40, 35. I look at myself and I see the results of being 57, like in my face and my body, but I don't, like, my attitude and my approach to life, and I don't think it's changed much. I think it's just part of my temperament. And I think those are the things that just carry on.
Yes. Wonderful. Wonderful. Let's talk about the pandemic, because I know that we discussed this a little bit before, and we both agree that it's been a bit of a wake up call, and almost like there's silver linings. It's caused a lot of people to make positive changes in their lives. So tell me, what's the silver lining for you of COVID, and how is that playing out in your coaching work?
Yeah, so just, silver linings for sure for some people, but I think that we've all lived through one pandemic. However, people have experienced it very differently. Some people have had incredible hardship, incredible change in their life, a lot of tragedy, a lot of,
Yes.
laying off of work and all sorts of things. So I think people have had different experiences in the pandemic. So I feel very privileged to have walked through it relatively unscathed.
Yes.
Um,
Me too.
and that is our privilege, right? So, however, I would say the silver lining is that I think people have become more reflective and have sort of faced down this fear of death and this fear all around us, and said, okay, it puts you in kind of a stark, like, what's important to me, it comes to the surface.
Yes.
And so I had cervical cancer in my 40s, and it was sort of like that, because when it was really scary, everything just came into really sharp focus, like, this is important, this isn't.
Mm-hmm.
I know what my priorities are. I know what the most important things are in my life,
Yeah.
which were my children and my family. It was just like so crystal clear. And I think to some degree, I think the pandemic has done that for people, that we really are clear what's important, like our relationships, our connections, our, the need to be with other people. Like, this isolation we've experienced has really made us realize how important the social connections are, and being actually physically present.
I found that as well, that it's a really good dose of perspective, because so many things have been taken away from us. You start to realize, oh, I was taking those for granted. I didn't intend to, but I had been.
Yeah.
And now when I'm able to do those things again or see those people again, I'm going to appreciate it much, much more. I'm reading a book. One of my favorite books is Wind, Sand, and Stars by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. And he's got this one story about when he crash landed in the Sahara with his co-pilot, and they were there for, I think, 3 or 4 days without water, and they found an orange in the plane after day 2, and it was like manna from heaven. It was like, just a normal orange, but for them it was like the best, the most intense joy that they had in their lives in some respects. And so it is funny how when something's taken away from you, you start to appreciate it more. And you mentioned death too, which is the ultimate taking away of everything you have. A lot of people find that morbid to talk about it, and depressing. And I actually believe that there's a lot of value in facing it down, and looking at, what am I going to want to say on my deathbed? What am I going to want my my eulogy to sound like. Do you ever think about that? That maybe there's some positive that comes from reflecting on our mortality?
Yes. Have you ever done a death meditation?
No, I haven't heard of that one.
Well, if you like, I'll send one to you.
Love that. How does that work?
It can be triggering for people, so just take it with a grain of salt. So it's a guided meditation that someone will take you through. I've never done it with someone, I've just experienced it.
Mm.
And it takes you through your death and dying,
Wow.
puts you in your coffin. You're imagining all this in this guided meditation. And so
Wow.
it's profound, and it's not depressing, but it can be very triggering for people. But it wasn't for me, it was all right. So when you come to present, it's okay, that felt like a real experience. And so what can I take from that? It's like, what's important? What do I want to, my life is finite. I'm only here. Like, I'm 57. I have maybe 35 more good years. Like, what do I want? It's not going to last forever.
Yes, and hitting 40, I realize I'm probably about the halfway mark. So everything is becoming more urgent as a priority. But at the same time, trying to slow down and be more patient and stop having the quality of my life be such a hectic, anxious pace, and then actually get more quality out of life rather than quantity. Because 80 years of a terrible life is not much of a life at all. It's I'd rather have 20 years of a fantastic, exceptional life. I don't know if many people would agree with that, but
Mike, that experience of the slowing down and the savoring and the enjoyment, if that's what you want, then that's great.
That is what I want. Yeah, I'm trying to consciously build a lot more. In my calendar, they're green blocks. Green spaces are absence of work. So it's time with my daughter. It's time for me solo. It's the gym. It's meditation. It's things like that. So my goal, I guess, in my week is to have the maximum or the optimal amount of green space in my calendar. So I'm working on that. I'm sure most people are working on that.
I love the color you chose for that.
Yeah, green. Go, live life, enjoy.
Or calm.
Yeah. And speaking of the way we think about life, I know that you work a lot with your clients' belief systems. The last time we talked, you introduced me to this idea of these 10 types of saboteurs. Mm-hmm. So tell us, what's a saboteur, and maybe you can give us an example of one or two of those.
Mm-hmm. Well, can you see that? Can you see this book here?
Yes, I know that book.
Yeah, so this work on saboteurs comes from Shirzad Shanin, and this book is called Positive Intelligence, and I took his program last year. And basically what he's saying is that we have a lot of negative voices in our heads, and he kind of breaks them down into kind of archetypes. So we have the controller, we have the perfectionist, we have the hypervigilant, we have the victim. So there's 9 of these. And then these are called your accomplice saboteurs, but the overall master saboteur is the judge.
I was going to say that's one of my vices, is just judgment.
The judge.
Not very productive and helpful.
Yes. So, right. So everyone has this master judge. All of us do.
Yes.
And in fact, it's not just inside our heads, it's in our culture. We have cultural judges. Our Western culture in North America is so judgmental.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't know what the roots of that is. Maybe Puritanism, who knows? But we have a very judgmental, evaluative, assessment-oriented culture. Like, you get a high mark, you're a winner, right? So I think our education system really has inculcated us.
Set you up from the beginning to climb your way up a hierarchy. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. That's what you're supposed to do. You're a winner, right? So if you're not, so this judgment culture and this judgment we then have inside us that we do to ourselves, he says is a mindset.
Right.
It's a saboteur. And so the idea is to catch yourself in that judgmental mindset. So
how do you do that?
You catch yourself. Well, I've learned to do it mostly, but it's a work in progress. So you having a thought and it's a judgmental thought, or I didn't do that right, or this is going to be terrible, or whatever it is that's negative. So the first step really is just to catch yourself. That's a judge. So that takes some work and some time to become aware of the cues inside your head. Like when you hear this, that means it's your judge.
Yes.
Right. So the beginning part is just the catching of yourself being judgmental, which takes quite a while. And then once we become familiar with this thinking pattern, the judge, we can then say, okay, how do you respond to that?
Yeah.
So how to respond to the judge is to say, okay, what am I learning? What are the gifts here? Like what can I learn from this judging situation?
But it's almost like treating the judgmental thoughts as simple messengers.
Exactly.
And leveraging those in order to change.
Exactly.
Right.
And then how do we respond to that?
Mm-hmm.
How can we respond to turn it into more of a positive thing for ourselves to learn? And I think then that's sort of, it's all about brain science. Yeah. So we know that, the neurons that fire together wire together. So we have these well-traveled, traverse patterns in our brain, patterns of thought, patterns of negative thought.
Patterns of judgment.
Oh yeah, deep, and they're deep, right? Deep. So in order to change them, like this is a well-traveled path. Mm-hmm. So if we want to make a new path and create more new neural connections, it's more like, bushwhacking. Like we're walking through a forest when we're trying to make a new path.
Yes.
But you do it often enough, the path becomes clear. We go down the path, and then it becomes unconscious that we don't have to think about it anymore. So I felt more
that as well.
No.
It makes a lot of sense, from a logical perspective. I guess, things that are simple are not always easy to do, of course. And so for me, for example, I definitely struggle with anger. And this is, been a recent thing. And I'm still investigating this with the help of my own coach, which has been wonderful because what she's doing for me is every week helping me to get better at catching myself, identifying the triggers at an earlier and earlier stage, even if that's a matter of microseconds. And once, you're right, once you do see these things happening, you can change them. You can't really change a problem if you don't see it, if you don't identify it. And so that is very, very helpful. But I'm finding it's a very slow process, very tedious process. I'm looking for a tool or a hack or something. And I'm not even sure that exists. I think the only way through this is to simply be more aware. Is that what you found as well?
Yeah, it's practice.
Yeah.
Practice.
Do you have any tools or practices that you use?
Well, I use that stuff for sure. Like there's an assessment you can take, and it's free online. Right. And you get this, you answer a bunch of questions and you get your top 2 accomplished saboteurs. So he explains how you got them. They all come in childhood in response to what you're living through. It's not your fault. It's just your survival brain created these ways of thinking to cope. So here you are as an adult though, and they're not necessarily needed anymore.
Yeah. It's very interesting that you mentioned childhood because I've always known intellectually that a lot of our personality is formed in those early years, but I'm seeing it a lot more clearly as I coach more and more clients. I'm seeing how much of their current belief systems, their limiting beliefs, their fears, their personalities, and my own, were really formed in those early years. Even before the age of 5. And now that I'm a dad, even more evidence to this phenomenon. I'm seeing, that every little thing I do is replicated or repeated by my daughter. And so I have to be very careful. There's a new onus on me to only give her very helpful, positive, illustrations, I suppose, or demonstrations. And I know that I'm going to make mistakes. I'm probably made 1,000 of them already, and she's only 18 months old. So how do you, we can't go back obviously to our childhood and fix that, but you can do the mental work to go back and uncover these things. Do you have a technique or a strategy you like to use to go back into childhood experiences to rewire?
Hmm. Well, I think of it not so much as going back to those experiences, but kind of understanding how they have manifested in me as an adult, and now what can I do um, to become aware of those negative thought patterns? And just, I use that a lot, that, okay, what am I learning? Or just simply, that's a judge, let it go.
Mm-hmm.
And more often now, I'm just finding myself letting it go, because the more I tell myself a story about this negative thing, and as Brené Brown says, this is the story I'm writing about this, right? I'm inventing this story about what this means. This is simply a thought. It's all it is.
In terms of, in some cases, a shitty first draft.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's just a thought.
Mm-hmm.
And now I can have another thought about it. So I'm going to just simply let that one go and not create a whole story around what this means, because all it is me putting meaning onto this situation where it doesn't even exist. I'm just creating
it's almost like what we're talking about here is the field of self-awareness, and that's kind of a mushy concept, but I'm finding out it's more and more important, to almost, wisdom is an elusive concept, but almost to build wisdom in your life, to start asking the questions of yourself internally. There's a lot of people chasing money and fame and et cetera on the external, or maybe, my wife needs to change, my parents need to change. And I'm realizing more and more that that's almost what is it? There's no value in doing that, because you can try to change your external world as much as you want. But if you don't change the internal stuff, nothing will change in your external world. And to change the internal, of course, you need to know what's going on inside there. So how do you build self-awareness? Just an easy, small question for you.
Well, I have a fairly significant meditation practice.
Oh, yes.
And I follow a writer called Philip Shepherd. I don't know if you know him.
No.
Look him up. He's a Canadian, and he's teaches something called the embodiment process. So his philosophy is that we are so in our heads as a culture, and that we have lost the connection with our wholeness.
Right.
The head, like the head and the body connection. And so our bodies hold so much wisdom that we leave untapped, or we believe it's just a mechanism for carrying around our heads. But really, there's so much in our heart, in our gut, that gives us information, wisdom, intuition. And so I've started, probably in the last year, I took his course last winter, and just coming into awareness of this deep wisdom and presence inside your body can be, so you get your head out of it, because your head is where the judge is, right? So if you can come into present with your body, and there's a presence inside your body that's different than your head.
How do you access that? Is it through meditation, or is it something else?
It starts with the breath. And he teaches some interesting breathing techniques that really help you. It slows down everything, because when you just focus on your breathing, all the thoughts just kind of go out, and just becomes an awareness of breathing in and breathing out. And I start all my coaching sessions with this work now.
Yes.
And people have often just rushed in from something, and they're sitting down, they're coming for the coach, and he's like, okay, let's just
I like that. I might borrow that idea.
Breathing and getting in touch with where you are in your seat and your feet on the floor, and just coming into present with us here now.
I really like that idea, because I notice a lot of my clients do come from other meetings, or they're in the middle of their day or something, or they've just come off a long work day. And you can tell that they are overwhelmed, they're stressed, they have anxiety. Yeah. And I noticed that in those cases, the coaching work is not as easy if the client is not as receptive. And so I think I'm gonna borrow that from you to start with a little bit of a setting the state.
Yeah. The first step is for you to do that prior to the coaching.
Yeah, I mean, I have my own little routine that I do. At the start of every coaching call, before the coaching call, I do my a little bit of Tony Robbins priming, which is a form of meditation. And I say, please give me the strength, the wisdom, the compassion, the kindness, the love, the intelligence to help this client. Let me be an excellent listener. Let me know when to listen and when to speak. When I do speak, let me know what it is I can say for this person's highest good. Please let us reach a breakthrough of some kind. And I find that's really helpful for me. But I think there's that component of adding it on the client's side as well. That's going to be powerful. So thanks for that.
Yeah, and I think you can. Not everybody is super open to that.
Right.
But I think if you sort of introduce it when you're designing your alliance with your client, to say, how do you feel about, just coming into some breathing exercises, some calming. I mean, you don't have to call it whatever you want, just to come into calm presence. Yeah. And everyone that I have, used this, at the beginning, always appreciates it. And then they start, using it in their own life sometimes.
And that's powerful now when they don't need you anymore. It's like, okay, you've taught them the skills. It's almost like that proverb about, you teach a man to fish versus giving him a fish. I like that idea of setting the client up for success even after they're finished with you. It's wonderful. Yeah. So I know I had a bunch of other questions lined up for you, but is there anything on your side that you want to talk about? I mean, we can go in whatever direction we like. Actually, you know what I do want to ask you is, how did you come to meditation?
How did I what? Sorry?
Come to meditation. How did you find it? What made you practice meditation?
That's a good question. It's a good story. So when I was my early 20s, my brother and my sister-in-law became practitioners of transcendental meditation. And so when I was 21, I was initiated into TM, and I started then. And I've been a practitioner. How long is that? 21 to 57.
Awesome. Wow.
That. And over the years it went in and out of, it hasn't been a smooth, ride. But
Never
there's been years where I kind of lost it, and the years where I got it back. And so then I've always kind of had that as a base, and I've explored different kinds of meditation along the way as well. And the breathing meditation is really powerful, I found. But TM has really, been the basis for my meditation practice over the years.
So is that what you practice daily? Is it a breathing meditation? How long do you usually meditate?
The optimal practice, which is not what I always do, but it's 20 minutes in the morning and 20 minutes at night.
Right.
You have a mantra. So you sit in a quiet place and you repeat your mantra, and your body just transcends, your breathing decreases, your blood pressure goes down, you come into a very relaxed state. If you're tired, you often fall asleep.
Yes.
And yeah, you come to a very kind of quiet, deep place in your body. That's the only way I can kind of describe it. And it's very healing.
I know what you mean. I call meditation one of my foundational habits. I have, a few habits that all of my other activities rest on top of, like exercise, and meditation is probably the core practice for me. I found meditation at 19 through one of these books by an American Lama, and I started practicing a little bit and enjoyed it. It felt like it was providing me benefits. And then I remember going home from university. I was 19. I went home from university and sitting at the kitchen table with my mom and dad. And I remember we were about to get into a fight, which was our normal standard habit, right? It was like clockwork. After 30 minutes of being home from university, we're having an argument about something, right? But I do remember in that phase after I started meditating that I disengaged. I wasn't interested in continuing that anymore. I was very aware of what was happening. I think for me, that's the best thing that meditation gives me, is that constant awareness. It's not just, in the moment practicing that you get the benefit. It's something that ideally translates to all of your life. And so, I've been meditating 10 minutes a day for since I was 19. And I kind of fell off the wagon when I had a daughter, right? Because it's very hard in the morning to sit quietly and find a space when there's breakfast that needs to be made and diapers to be changed, etc. And so I've recommitted to that practice in the last few weeks, and I noticed a shift in my attitude again, my mood and my energy. I would actually go so far as to say that meditation saved my life. I was in a very bad place a decade ago with depression and not working, trying to start as a writer, have very bad habits, sleeping in late, staying up till 5 a.m, going out drinking. And it was meditation that pulled me out of it. I found a wonderful book by John Kabat-Zinn. Do you know him?
I do.
Oh, he's amazing, right? He's one of these almost like I wouldn't say expert, but almost like an elder of the mindfulness world, I suppose, at least in the literature.
Yes.
And he has this book called The Mindful Way Through Depression, and it
Mm.
helped me to see that thoughts are not reality. You can see thoughts as passing clouds. The clouds move. Sometimes it storms, and they don't carry meaning. They're clouds. They're moving by.
Nice.
Same with thoughts. Same with emotions. It's a wonderful way to approach life when you can see it that way. So
Yeah, I love that image of it's on a cloud and it's just passing by.
right.
Yeah, it's ephemeral, non-attachment. Yeah.
Yeah, and that again, simple concept, but hard to put that into practice. And another thing that helps me is an image of, actually the way someone described meditation to me was I think it might have been John Kabat-Zinn. You're sitting on the bank of a river and you're watching the flow of the water go by. And from time to time you fall in, you get carried down the river. Meditation is really just pulling yourself out of the water, sitting back on the bank and watching the stream again. The thought stream is the metaphor, right?
Mm-hmm.
And for me, I love to describe meditation that way. It's exactly what the practice is for me. So yeah, it's been very very helpful for, I guess, both of us.
Yeah, and I think that concept of becoming the observer.
Yeah.
And I think as you practice meditation, it doesn't happen right away because we're not trained to observe our thoughts, observe our feelings, detach from, like we think that's what it is. We are. So, but then the meditation and that's what TM did for me too. You become the observer of those things. So you realize this is not, all that stuff isn't me.
Yeah.
These are passing things, not gonna attach to them. Where I am just here as the observer of those things. And when we become the observer, it takes the charge out of it, right?
Yeah, absolutely right. It's such a powerful realization when you have it, that I'm not my thoughts. The thoughts are simply a tool that I have as a conscious human being, but I am something else, something greater. And you can call that a soul, or you can call it something else. The Hindus have different terminology for it, the Buddhists as well.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, once you see that I'm observing those thoughts, I am behind those thoughts. And Alan Watts has a whole hours and hours of audio lecture about this concept and how many watchers are there behind the watcher and whatnot. But it was an enlightening concept for me to realize that, hey, I don't need to take things so seriously.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, good. And I know that you are a great collector of quotes. Is there one that comes to mind in this particular moment that you like?
Yes, in fact, it was one that I wrote about in my most recent blog. Maybe you found it there. So it's a woman, her name is Emily McDowell, and she's an American writer. And this quote, when I found it, it really sort of encapsulated how I feel about coaching.
Yes.
So it goes like this: finding yourself is not really how it works. You aren't a $10 bill in last winter's coat pocket. You are also not lost. Your true self is right there, buried under cultural conditioning, other people's opinions, and inaccurate conclusions you drew as a kid that became your beliefs about who you are. Finding yourself is actually returning to yourself, an unlearning, an excavation, a remembering of who you were before the world got its hands on you.
That's wonderful.
Yeah. Emily McDowell.
That's great. I'll have to look into her.
Yeah, and that's how I feel about coaching. I mean, maybe that's a nice way to end the conversation, if that's where you want to end it, but that I hold people already naturally creative, resourceful, and whole, and that is my coach training. And I think as much as we think we're flawed and imperfect, and of course we are, but that underneath it, all that stuff happened to us in life. I mean, does a baby come into the world how does a baby come into the world? You held your baby. Is that baby,
Perfect. I'm
you
biased,
know?
but I think perfect.
Yeah, of course. So we don't judge that baby. Like, the baby just is who she is.
Yes.
And so I think we're under all those layers of judge from our culture, from our parents, from our employers, from our world. But underneath, we are whole.
Yes.
And I think the process of uncovering that and accepting who we are is a really profound experience. And I think coaching can bring us to that. And it's life altering.
I completely agree with you. I tell my clients that I don't have the answers for you. They're all inside of you. And my job is to help you bring them to the surface.
Exactly.
And I've been reading for years, wisdom from the Buddhist tradition and Taoist tradition. And I feel like they're getting at the same thing, that enlightenment is not something to go, to keep climbing up the ladder and find it at the top of the ladder, but it's something that happens when you realize that nothing is missing, that everything is perfect as it is. Yeah. And I don't quite understand it yet, but I'm getting closer. I think maybe saying that is pushing me further away. Who knows? But I like that idea that there's nothing to be done. There's nowhere to go. There's nothing to strive for. It's all right there. It's perfect as it is.
Yeah, and I think the something that I came to maybe in my 40s, around your age, is that we're okay as who we are.
Yeah.
We are. It really is okay just to be who you are.
That's
because
liberating.
It is what it is, and not only is what it is, but it's wonderful.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. Well, I think that's a wonderful note and sentiment to leave it on. Is there anything else you want to share with us before we go?
Not really, except, if people are interested in my coaching, if they're interested in chatting to me about.
Where can we find you online?
Yeah, joedaviscoaching.com.
joedaviscoaching.com. Great.
Yeah, I have a program coming up shortly, actually, if people are interested. It's a 5-part workshop series for women in their second spring. And yeah, looking forward to that coming up.
Okay, well, we'll do what we can to get the word out. So thanks so much, Joe. I really appreciate our conversation as usual. Appreciate your time, and have an amazing day.
Yeah, you too. Lots of fun. Thanks, Mike. Take care.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.